the processes of the ERP, but it requires also thinking to the architecture. And here are my contacts before starting the session. So if you want to reach me on other socials or write me some more questions after the conference, feel free to reach me on one of these accounts. In this 1 hour, the topic that I want to present, we will not be too much, try to not be too much technical, but I want to emphasize some topics. The first topic is talking about extensibility concepts. We'll see how to write code for extensibility, so techniques and tips for writing code for extensibility. We'll talk about also about extending reports, one of the new features available in starting from Business Central 18. And then we'll have a moment for sharing question and answer for what you want. So to start, I think that if many of you comes from NAV or from the old system, knows that in the CIL era was quite easy to customize the system because the system was a big box. And normally in a NAV installation, you have a base layer, so objects available worldwide. Then you have a localization layer, objects specific for that localizations. You can have, in a typical installation, you can have add-ons that can be your add-on or external add-ons. And then you can also have a custom code that you write for your customers for these specific projects. And when you are on a project, normally in an AV, you write code directly into different layers. So for example, if you have an add-on you can customize objects of the localization layer and also objects from the base layer. And similar, when you write a custom code for your customers, you can directly modify objects of your add-on, for example, objects of the specific localization and object of the base layer. This is changed with the IL and the extension here, because actually, especially in the cloud, layers are completely separated. So you have a base application where you have a localization layer, so objects specific for that localizations. You have extensions, maybe comes from app source or other sources, and then you have your custom extension or per tenant extension that you develop for that specific customers. Extensions cannot interact. You cannot modify objects of from one extension directly modify objects of another extension. And so you need to react by using events or extensibility patterns. When we talk about apps, remember that apps are isolated as default. So one app cannot see objects in another app. And normally when you start creating a project with Visual Studio Code, when you create a project for an app, you have a default dependency from the base application of Microsoft. So you can see there automatically all the objects that come from the base application, because base application is an extension that share dependencies. So when you have a project and you create one app, things are quite easy, because if you have a mono app, you have only dependencies for the base application, and inside that app, you can see all objects that comes from the base application and all objects that you define inside that app. But things change when you have start having different apps in a tenant. Because when you split your solution into different apps, you can see objects from the base application, but normally you need also to interact between apps. So you can have apps that maybe have the need to see objects declared on other apps or interact with objects declared on other apps and so on. So things start being more complex. And normally it's not splitting from a monolithic solution into different apps is better. It's not something that you should avoid just because it's difficult, but it's something that you should do. But normally, in order to have interaction between apps, you need to create code for extensibility. Otherwise, you have some difficulties. And writing code for extensibility, what means? Essentially means that you need to use events in code. So you cannot modify objects, but you need to use events. You need to use enums. Enums are the evolutional options and permits you to use handle extensibility. You need to create your code by using extensibility patterns, and we'll see some of them. And last in this list, but not last, you need to think about also the architecture of your solution, because especially who comes from NIV, often a classic NIV programmer doesn't know too much about the solution architecture of a complex project, but directly thinks only to satisfy that business business problem. So I have a business problem, I directly modify the object in order to satisfy my customer. But now you should sit down a moment and then start thinking what the best solution for this problem, but also thinking about the entire solution architecture. So we start to see these building blocks. The first building block in terms of creating extension for extensibility is using events. Events is not a new concept. It's not a new concept that comes from IL language or from Business Center. It's a concept that comes from the old NIV era. And in CIL and also in IM, you add and you have now events. You can declare events of different types. Normally, you have events that are business events, and integration events are the most common types of events that you use. Business events are normally events that you can declare in your code, and if you declare a business event, you have an implicit rule that you will not change that signature of that event in different versions of your extensions. While if you can create inside the integration events where you can change the signature of events between versions. You can have in Business Center, you have also other types of events like triggers, like global events, so system events, and also internal events. Internal events means that you can declare events as internal, and if you declare an event as internal, this event will be subscribable only from objects inside your extensions. And when you declare an event, there are three entities that comes in play for using events. There's the events itself. The events itself is a function that has some parameters, and a declaration of function that declare in IL, and it's what is called the event publisher function. Then you have the publisher. The publisher is the object itself that contains the event publisher definition and raise that as a publisher that event. And then you have the subscriber. The subscriber is only the object that listens and subscribes to a particular event. And when we add, of course, react and handle some business logic. So events is the first building block for writing extensions. And to start talking about extensibility, I want to start with a first easy example. Imagine that I have a requirement that is to handle shipment commissions. And my requirement is that when I release an order, a business rule should start, and I need to calculate the shipment commissions for that orders in a particular way that my customer want, and the shipment commission that will be placed inside the order. To do that, as in the old CIL era, you can subscribe to an event in order to start your rules. So, for example, here in this case, I created a simple code unit where I have an event subscriber. And the subscriber in a IL language can be created by using the event snippet, the event sub, and then defining what type of object raises the event. In my case, is the sales post code unit. So the code unit is raised by the posting process, and this is the event inside the sales post code unit that I want to subscribe. Inside that event, I can see the parameters that this event, this code unit, this event subscriber raises to me, and I can call my procedure. I've written here my procedure that calculates. This is the procedure that calculates the shipment commissions. And I've written this procedure exactly like in the old NIV. So my procedure here is a custom rule that maybe my customer asked me that to calculate the shipment commission, I want to loop through all the lines inside this sales order, all the lines with where the type is an item, and I want to check the quantity of this line. If the quantity is less than 10 pieces, I want to charge that order of these euros or dollars. Feel free to use the money that you want. Otherwise, if the quantity is more than 10 pieces, I want to charge of 5 euros. And then the total gives me, in this case, gives me the shipment commissions. This solution is perfectly okay for my first customer. But imagine that this is not an extension that I develop for a particular customer, but this is my add-on. My add-on that maybe I want to sell on all my customers, and maybe also I want to place on the store, on the AppSource marketplace. So shareable with all the possible users. If you write a code in this way, and maybe you start selling this add-on to another customer, and this new customer has totally different rules for calculating the shipment commission. As you can see, it's not possible to customize that shipment commission, because or you directly change the code inside there, or otherwise you have no possibility to interact with this code from another extension. So this is where events as a first step comes in place. If you want to sell this solution, a solution that calculates the shipping commission for an order with a standard algorithm, and then this standard algorithm can be customized by for other customers without touching your base application, you need to start using event as a first step. And using events means that your new method for calculating the shipment commissions should be enriched with events on different points that you decide to be that can be possible entry point for modifications. So, for example, here, as you can see here, I created a set of events, one at the start of the shipment commission algorithm, one before the calculation of the shipment commission for a particular line, one at the end of the calculation of the shipment commission for that line, and one at the end of the total calculation of the shipment commissions. In this way, these are events. So I created a integration events with the t-event int snippet, standard snippet, where that in the integration event you simply need to specify if you want to include sender. Include sender means that you want to include the global variable that comes from the sender, and you create the name of your event and the parameters of your event, as you can see here. Here I created 4 events. One called on before get shipment commission, where I want to pass the sales header, because maybe other extension can interact before starting calculating the commissions, the shipment commission, and maybe I can do something before from another extension. I want to open the possible door to be customizable here. I raised an event called on before calculate shipment commission line that pass as argument the sales line and total of the shipment commission. This is because I want from other extension to be accessible and to have interactions also before the calculation of a line in order to do something, and the same after the calculation of the line and after the calculation of the total. In this way, I created a standard business process. This is my standard business process, but that now is customizable. So what happens if I sell this extension to another customers? Imagine that now I open this second project. I sell my add-on to another customer, and as you I think that you know, if you work with Business Central, when you want to customize an extension, you need to create a new extension that depends from the extension that you want to customize. So as you can see here, this extension has a dependency block, and in the dependency block, depending from my base add-on, the base app is my base add-on, the previously projects. And what I'm doing here, here I'm simply creating an event subscriber. Imagine that this customer wants, here I created 2 scenarios. My customer wants, first request, my customer wants calculate the shipment commission by using a simple fixed price. So every order has $10 of shipment commissions. I can simply subscribe to the on after get shipment commission event that I created before. So my last event in the chain. And then I can simply place the variable, my total variable as 10. In this case, if I move the previous project, I'm subscribing to that event, and by simply filling this variable, I'm returning the correct shipment commission that I want. So without touching my base code, I satisfy my customer that wants a fixed price for future commissions. The same thing happens if I have a customer, a new other customer where I sell my add-on that is asking me to have a different calculation for a different algorithm for calculating shipment commission, now based for the weight of the price of the lines. So the new algorithm is if I need to loop to the line, I need to retrieve the items on these lines. I need to check the net weight. I multiply the net weight for the quantity of the lines. So I calculate the total weight of the line. And if the weight is less than 10 kilograms, the shipment commission is $10, otherwise it's 10, or is 5, otherwise it's 10. I can do that subscribing to the lines event. So just to show the previous project to this event, because subscribing here, I can interact and I can calculate with my new algorithm, fill the total variables, and the new calculation is satisfied. My customer is satisfied. So I have a complete customization possibilities of the shipment commission algorithm. As you can see, here customization is total. So my code is totally extendable and customizable, but there's also a drawback. I can subscribe to these events, handle the customization, but I have no way here to avoid the standard calculation. So what happens here is that the standard calculation is performed, and then the event is subscribed, and then my custom calculation is raised, and the return value is the custom calculation. But to be more performant, I would like to have a way to avoid the standard calculation and then only executing the custom calculation for that customer wants. And this is what we will see in a second scenario. So a second scenario means talking about what is called, I want to replace the slides, what is called the handle pattern. The handle pattern is a common pattern for handling extensibility in extensions. Is a loose coupling pattern because that permits you to have some points in your application where you can bypass functionality. So as how this pattern works, you can publish an event on your base application, publish an event. Then inside that event, you can check if the event is handled by someone else or not. If it's handled by someone else, you can stop execution and then move to the other part. Otherwise, you can execute your standard logic. What happens on the subscriber? So on another extension that want to customize your base app, the other app needs to subscribe to your publish event, needs to handle that event, and then simply execute a custom logic. In this way, you can bypass a custom logic, and you can execute. You can bypass your standard logic, sorry, and you can execute your custom logic. And this is one of the most common patterns in use also in the base application on different parts. Just to show this, let me close this. I move to another project. And we see a second way of doing the same things, but now with the handle pattern. So what happens here? Here I have the same algorithm as before, called get shipment commissions. But now my event here is raising a new parameters called end on line, and this end on line parameter is a Boolean parameters. And what I'm doing here, simply before start see this line. These are the top the top event that I'm raising is called on before get shipment commission. In the first version of the extension, I was as parameter I had as parameter only the safe setter. Now I have also the handle Boolean, and what I'm doing here is if handle is true, I'm exit to this function. So all this code, standard code, is not executed. And handle is true only if someone else has subscribed me and has placed handle true. In this way, I've used this pattern into two blocks. One is here and one is here, where I want for a line, skip the customization. If I want only for that line to skip the calculation, here my event handles as the handle line parameters, and here if handle line is false, I'm executing this custom logic. Otherwise, I'm skipping the calculation for this line. This is a common pattern, quite useful on many scenarios in order to avoid executing your custom logic and instead executing the custom logic or that your customer want. So what happens on my customer extension? So on the extension that I sell to my customer, I can simply do that now if I want to skip the standard shipment commission calculation and instead I want to handle my custom rules. I can subscribe to this event on before get shipment commission. I can simply place handle true, and handle true means that this event will not be raised. The standard event will not be raised. The standard logic will not be raised because it was immediately skipped, and the calculation that we start is my custom calculation. So here I reach the same functionality as in the previous example, but now it's more efficient because I'm not executing the standard logic, but I have executed only the custom logic. So the code is more performant and more reliable in this case by using this pattern. But you can do more. This is a common pattern that I suggest to use in your code, but now you can also do more in your extensions. And this is what we'll see in the next demo. So to events, remember that events, you should start using events in your extension, enrich your extension with events. Events has no event publisher has no impact on performances. So enrich your extension with events, if you want to be extendable. Event subscribers can affect performance. Obviously, if you have a lot of extension inside your database and all these extensions subscribe to events of your base app, you can affect performance. So you should try to avoid a long chain of subscribers. And remember also that the size of the subscriber co-unit actually can impact the performance. So smaller is better. If you have a small co-unit, is better. And sometimes having a single instance co-unit for where you handle all your events is better in terms of performance instead of declaring a simple co-unit where all your events, because a single instance co-unit is instantiated in memory only one time. Remember also that subscribing to table events affects bulk operations. So if you subscribe to on after modify events or something like that, and your code performs a modify all is not raised as modify all, but it's raised as a single modify. But we want to move to the next step of customization, so of extendability. And the next step of extensibility is using interfaces. Interfaces is an object-oriented concept that permits you to define which capabilities an object has without thinking to the real implementation of that capabilities. Interface permits you to declare an object with methods, and a unit that implements that interface must use the implements keyword in order to implement the methods defined into the interfaces. And the interface itself is only a declaration, it's only a contract, does not contain code, signatures, and so on. When the AI compiler, when you implement an interface, checks to ensure that your implementation is totally compliant to the contract. So if the contract specifies that you need to define free methods, your implementation must define these free methods with the same parameters. So how you can use interfaces in order to be extendable and in order to improve our previously created code a bit more. So we have seen the first scenarios without extensibility, the second scenario by using events, and we have seen that using events we can be extendable, but we cannot avoid the execution of standard code. Third scenario is using the angle pattern. In this case, we can be extendable, and we can also avoid the execution of our base code. Now we can see how we can be extendable by using interfaces. And to show that, I need to open an example exactly like same scenario as before, but now created by using interfaces. So this is our add-on in this case. Base app is my add-on solution, and my add-on solution handles shipment commissions. To do that, I want in order to do that, the first thing that I've used in this extension is that I create an interface object in IL language. An interface object in IL can be declared with the snippet interface, or in this way, interface is an object with a name, and it contains only declarations, so only procedure with input and output parameters that you need to implement. So in my case, my interface called shipment commission calculation declares a method called get shipment commissions that works on the sales header and then returns the decimal value that they are the value of the shipment commission for that sales header. So this is the interface declaration, and then my add-on must implement the shipment commission calculation. So here I have created a code unit called the shipment commission calculation base. This code unit now has a new attribute called implements. That means that this code unit implements the shipment commission calculation interface. And if you do that, you are forced to create the implementation of the interface. So you are forced to implement the methods declared in the interface. So in this case, the get shipment commission method with the sales header parameter and the decimal parameter as a return. And here I simply used the previously logic. So in this case, I loop it through the lines, I'm checking the quantity, and I'm doing a standard calculation. Then I want to, this is my add-on, so I want to be customizable. So what I've done here, I want to specify that as standard, my add-on uses this method of calculating the shipment commission, but you can change that in your extension. So what happens here, I creating enum objects. This enum object is called shipment commission calculation method, and this shipment commission calculator methods implements the shipment commission calculations. So this means that this also in enum in the IL language can implement interfaces, and you can specify by using the values of the enum, what interface is this? If you select this value, what interface is called? So in my case, if you select the enum value the 0, so the default value, the implementation is defined is the iShipment commission interface, and then the definition of the implementation is this code unit. In this case, as you can see, I created a table extension also of the sales and receivables setup. And in this setup, I created a field called shipment commission calculator method. This field is an enum field, so an option where you can select what type of shipment commission calculation method you have. This enum, as I go back to the enum has also an important keyword that is extensible true. Extensible true means that you can extend this enum. So what happens? This is my add-on, and this is my standard rule of calculation. Now, in the next example that I'm opening, someone else wants to change the shipment commission calculator with another algorithm because my other customer wants something different. And what I've done here, same things. I'm creating an enum extension of the enum extension is an object that you can declare in real that extends an enum. So I'm extending the shipment commission calculation method. I'm adding here a new values called, in this case, fixed price, because this customer wants to calculate the shipment commission with a fixed price. So I'm creating a new method of implementation called fixed price. This method also implements the iShipment commission calculation, but now with the implementation is contained into a shipment commission calculation custom code unit. So this code unit is where I have my implementation. And as before, this code unit implements the same interface, but now the implementation is different. Here is simply returning fixed values, while before I was looping to the lines and doing some different things. So in this way, I'm totally extendable without writing events, without doing nothing, because I simply create a new method for an implementation, and then I implemented the interface with my own calculation. This is the same way as Microsoft has done in Business Central with the new price sales price calculation. So if you check the code of the sales price rules, this new implementation uses interfaces. So in this case, you are totally customizable without writing events, without writing some codes or something like that. I go back to the slides. Interfaces now has also two new parameters that I want just to show you. I don't think that there's documentation actually about that, but now you can also define a default implementation of the interface and also an unknown value implementation of the interface. Useful if someone removes enums value from another extensions. So you can create for example, the default implementation is this interface, and if the enum is removed, the implementation is that other. Another important aspect when we talk about extendability is table extensions. Table extensions is the way to extend tables. Table extension has a big problems if you abuse of this. And the big problem is that they can affect performances, because a table extensions, when you create a table extension, it creates a new table inside that database by using the primary key of the standard table plus all your new added fields. That means that when you do something like find set, find last, and so on, a join of the companion, the standard table plus all the companion tables is done by the platform, and so your performance can be affected. And normally performance can be affected by the number of the table extensions, but also by the size of the table, number of records, frequency of access, and so on. So what I've done, what you can also done by yourself, in this simple example, I create a table extension, and then I adding 1, 2, 3, and so on extension that simply adds a new field into a custom table. Fill this custom table with tons of records, and you can see that without table extension, your business center is quick to answer. With 2 table extensions, your business center starts to become slow. With 5 table extensions, your business center starts showing something like this. So working on it means that it's able to retrieve the same number of records. And as standard, I think that if you have 5 or 6 table extensions that extends the same table, and this table is an heavy table, so with lots of records, imagine GL entry, item ledger entry, or something like that, you can start having a decrease of performances, a lot of decrease of performances. So the number of table extensions should, with the same table extension should be reduced. You should start avoiding too much extension that extends the same table. What does a lot in terms of self-performance is using also the partial loading features. I don't talk about the partial loading now, but partial loading is a new technique that you can use for when you do fine set operation like this or looping through records, because they permit to avoid the joins between extensions. So what about extensibility? Because now today we are talking about tips for extensibility. If you have a tenant with different apps can interact between other, can extend the same table, so you can have a lot of problems. To avoid this, one of the tricks, not in my opinion, not too much documented, but is one of the useful tricks that sometimes you can have is using the library apps techniques. Library apps means that instead of having different extensions, like in the first schema, that extends different tables in this case. So you can have simply a library app that contains your business logic, your tables. This library app has a dependency from the base, and your apps, in this case, depends only from the library, not from the single tables like in this case. In this case, you can avoid the chain of dependencies. You can have a single app that contains the business logic, so you can also avoid dependencies between apps. And remember that a library app, if you are going through app source permits you to deploy your app, your real app, in this case, for example, one of these, and you can deploy together the library app. The library app is an app that will not be published in app source, but when you install one of these, it will be automatically installed or updated into your tenant. So totally transparent for you. And these are techniques that permits you to reduce dependencies between extensions. Another tips that normally I want to remember to partners is that remember that security in the cloud. Because when talking about extensibility, you need to also to think about security. So imagine that you have an app where you have a table, and in this table, you want to store some secrets. Another app, maybe not your app, but another app can be dependent from you and can read, modify, or delete your secrets if you are using a table to store secrets or sensitive data. So the recommended way is that in Business Central, there's what is called the isolated storage. The isolated storage is a data storage that provides isolation between extensions. And the isolated storage has methods for setting a key value pair, so a copy of key values, with a particular data scope. And every data in the isolated storage is only visible from that extension that has written that data, or level before, or level more strict. Never see by other extensions. So if you have secrets, license keys, or I don't know, something like that, use the isolated storage for extensibility because it's much more better, much more reliable. Remember also that if you are using my personal recommendation, if you have procedures that writes data into the isolated storage like this, I prefer writing like this. So with the attribute internal means that we will not be debuggable, it will not be reachable by every other extension, and so it's internal to your extension. No one can see that these methods can debug these methods, so your secrets are much more enforced. Last topic that I want to talk today about extendability is about reports. Previously, report is one of the parts in Business Central that will not be extendable. So you cannot extend reports in Business Central before now. But now, finally, we have a first step in this direction. So we have the reports extensions. And so you no longer need to branch reports to add for adding additive changes like new fields, new column, new data items, and so on. So you can add columns, data item. You can also modify the request page and so on to existing reports. And you can do also other. If you are selling apps, also others can extend your reports. You still do the old way, so copy the standard report if you want to do destructive changes to the report. So if you want to modify existing data items or change the trigger code inside the standard report. For doing that, you need to recreate a new report. Otherwise, no. What is a report extension now? It's a new object that you can have in a YAML language. And the report extension can be created by using the t-report-ext snippet. And report extension requires an ID as like every other object. And it extends the report that you want. When extending the report, you can specify the RDLC layout and Word layout or your new layout that will be created. All the other sections are similar to reports. So you have a dataset section where you can define and add changes to data items and columns. You have a request page section where you can add change to the request page, add new fields, and also on to the request page of the standard reports. You have not actually active, but in the next future, next release, you have also a labels section where you can specify labels, so new labels to add to the reports. You have section for triggers where you can add code to the triggers, and this code will be executed in queue to the standard triggers. You can define procedures inside the report extension, so new function to add to the standard reports that you are extending, and you can also add global variables to the report extension. Triggers supported are not all. Extension supports on pre and post report, but not the on-init report, because the on-init report is triggered before the extendability of the report engine. So it's actually not supported because it's not possible to do that. What happens on this trigger? The trigger execution first are executed the trigger on the base report, then are executed the trigger on the extended report by following the dependency graph. So by following the dependencies. When you create, now we see how to add columns. You can, as I said before, you have a new key in the report extension inside the dataset block, and you add the key that permits you to select a data item. And then inside that data item, you can add new fields. So for example, you can add a custom field. You can add a global variable. You can add a report variable, so local variable. You can also add expressions like a calculation or something like that. And you can also add a procedure, so a new column that calls a procedure defined in your report extension. So you can do what you can do, exactly what you can do in a standard report. So procedures that can be local or global and so on, you can call units or something like that. So in your data item, you can add all what you want. You can also select properties, not capture and capture MLL at the moment. Modifying existing data items is instead, in general, not supported at the moment. So you can modify an existing data item of an the extended report. You can add a new data item, add new fields, add new calculations, but not modify an existing data item. This is for not breaking changes. There are some report extension. You cannot consider now the report extension object as a finished object, because the report extension will be improved just in the next cumulative update, so 18.1. In the 18.1, you will have request filter fields improvements, cal fields improvements. There are no plans at the moment to support modify column properties. So you can modify columns or hide the columns from the default layout, something like that. The same is no plans to support modifying standard labels. You can modify standard labels of the standard reports. Or you can only add the new labels. There are also plans for there are no plans for overwriting existing triggers. So you cannot overwrite what happens in the on after get record or something like that on the standard reports, but you will have new events for handling the standard events. So, for example, plans are to have events like on before pre-data item, on after pre-data item, and so on before after get record, on after get record, in order to interact with that. You can also add new data items, and here we quickly show how to do that. So you can also add a new data item to existing data items. So to do that, you can simply select what data items you want. So add first, add last, and so on, exactly like in a page. You select the data item, and then you can create a new data item that you want to add, and you can nest data items as done before. So simply by filling the data item, link reference, and so on. So you can add data item in chains. This permits you to add new data items. Remember, no, you cannot change data items. So you cannot remove a data item from defined into the standard report. All the fields are similar to the normal data item. So same properties like for defining the data item, same properties for defining the links, same triggers of the data item. So for example, on after get record and so on, you can define, and you can do all these things. Same columns, can add all the columns that you want. So this is a new object that you can start using just right now. Remember also that when you define a report extension works at the dataset level. It doesn't work at the layout level. So layout must be created. So you need to, it works, you have a totally filled dataset. So you inherit all from the standard dataset plus all your customizations. But the layout, word layout or RDLC layout is the standard layout. You can define your own. And when you publish the table extension, one of the magic of the table extension is that if you publish a report extension with your custom layout, and then you go in Business Central into the custom layout sections, select the extended report. So for example, the sales invoice. Imagine that I am extending the sales invoice. I'm publishing a new layout together with my report extension. When you go to the sales invoice report into the custom layout, you click on the custom layout, and you can see that a new layout is added. So you can select the new layout that you want to use. So very powerful, and it's one of the first steps to trying to close that gap. So for me, it's the concept that I want to show today is ended. I hope you enjoyed this event, and we will continue to enjoy this event. Now, if you have some questions, I'll not check the chat now, but there's a question that how about on-prem data item triggers, can that be extended? Plans, actually the answer is no, but plans are in the near future. I don't know if they will be 18.1 or something like that. In the future, plans are to add new triggers called to on before predata item, on after predata item, on before after get record, on after get record. So plans are to add triggers to a report that acts before and after a standard trigger in order to attach and works on these triggers. So extensibility is not easy. I know that it's not easy. You should, recommendation is start using this concept. We have not see all the possibilities, but we have seen all the main possibilities to the main tips, in my opinion, to remember when writing code now. So events, patterns, interfaces, report extensions, in order to avoid as much as possible to duplicate code between distribution of your apps and having apps that can be extended. Kindly guide us about some learning resources, videos for business central development. Learning resources, there are a lot of learning resources, I think. I suggest to start, it depends on what, I suggest to start from Learn. Microsoft Learn has some learning path for who wants to start with development. So I suggest to start from there. Then there are lots of blogs, a lot of YouTube channels where you can learn things. So maybe we can share more details on these features and these sources of informations. Would like to know about existing app technical upgrade. What do you mean? Now technical upgrade, I not understood the questions. If you, to move to Business Central, maybe. Moving to Business Central is actually supported from Business Central 14. Moving now to Business Central, I think that from Business Central 14 to Business Central 18, there are paths for moving. So this is actually supported. And totally the process to do is totally documented from on docs, and there is also an interesting session in the launch event if you want to do that. But docs contains all of that. So obviously from NIV you need to do a step before. So you need to move NIV to Business Central 14 at least. So moving from CIL to IL. And that not to be an easy task and not completely automated. But when you have done that, you can easily move to another version of Business Central because you have the tools for doing that. So if there are no more questions because time is running, I invite every one of you to next week. There are 2 interesting Microsoft webcasts. On Monday and Friday. One, if you are especially interested on see what you can do with Business Central, open to the Power Platform, especially with Dataverse. We have 2 interesting webcasts. One for one mainly for Business Central and Teams, what you can do more from the standard integrations. What if you want to more about the standard integration, and then we have another webcast on Tuesday about integration with the Power Platform. So if you can join this meeting, I recommend to follow.
Thank you once again, Stefano. So Stefano, there's one final question by Ahmed Terau, who's asking if a first partner uses item extension solution 1 and a second partner uses item extension solution 2, do we use partner 2? Does partner 2 need to create an extension of the existing extension, and what the impact is of that?
Yes, classical scenario that you have in every project, I think, is that you have an extension that sells to the world. So my scenario was extension 2. Scenario 1 is my extension, my base extension that I'm selling to the world. I don't want, what you should avoid in Business Central is if you have customer 1, 2, 3, you should avoid to sell this your same extension to with customization or the same extension to customer 1, 2, 3. But you should always have one single extensions that you sell to all the customers, and then you do customization on top of this. So you don't have to work as an old NIV era, but now you need to work with extensibility in mind. So what happens if you have write code with extensibility that you simply sell to your customer 2 your base extension, and then for this customer 2 you simply implement a small per tenant extension where you interact with your events or with your interfaces, and then define the custom logic for that customer. So this second extension will be a smaller extension because your main logic is inside all your add-on, and this is where we can go. You are ready for outsource. You are ready to sell your extension to all over the world. This is the way of doing things in Business Central now.
Thank you once again for confirming that again, Stefano. And I've shared the link to your book, Mastering Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central. There's a 30% discount happening this month using the discount code PowerCom. It ends this month. So if you want to take advantage of that book, Stefano, could you share about what you cover in that book, please?
Sorry, no, I don't understood.
Stefano, could you share a little bit about what your book covers, please?
Sorry. Yes. This book covers all the development parts of Business Central. This was a huge work. It's 100 pages books. It was a huge book written not only by me, but also by another Microsoft guys on the Business Central teams. This book starts from the beginning, so from the things that you need to know from developing extension, creating a project, and so on, and then covers all the more advanced topics like partners for accessibilities, APIs, integration, web services, integration with the Power Platform, and more testing, automatic testing, and more and more. I think that it's a book that can be possible, that can be useful for everyone, every Business Central developers, from who starts, and also from who is for is an expert, because contains a lot of topics that start from the beginning to the more advanced.
Excellent. So Stefano, once again, it was a great pleasure to have you today. And please remember to get in touch with Stefano.
I cannot hear you.
Hello. I think we lost
Okay,
you.
now we can hear.
There, thank you so much. So again, thank you, Stefano. Remember to share your
Thank
connection details and blog in the chat so people can keep in touch with you. And remember, we will be announcing the winners of these books. We've already got 3 winners from today, from people who've been using promo codes. So we already have 3 winners we announced today. We'll be announcing the remaining winners tomorrow during the remaining 2 tracks of the Business Central Bootcamp. Also, some of your questions regarding upgrades of Business Central from Nav to Business Central, we will be covering them in topics tomorrow. So make sure you tune in tomorrow also. So once again, thank you, Stefano, for your great session.
You all.
Thank you so
all,
much.
and I hope to know soon the winner of the book.
Definitely, we got 10 winners. We have 10 winners of your book, Stefano. So we will be announcing the remaining 7 winners at the end of today and also tomorrow.
Okay, thank you very much. Enjoy the event.
Awesome, and thank you once again, Stefano. It's a legend for people who don't know Business Central and the community. Stefano is definitely one of the biggest legends for Business Central, but not only just for Business Central, for Power Platform as well. You definitely need to follow his blog. And again, a big thank you once again to Stefano. So it was a great pleasure hosting Stefano. It was a developer track, so I'm hoping many of you benefited from that. I know this event is aimed at mainly accountants, functional, although we do have a dedicated developer track. I know many of you here are developers and technical consultants. So without further ado, I would like to invite the next speaker, Dustin Domaris from Dynamics Consulting Group, who has a really great session. Again, for those more business management, functional, who are responsible for managing their implementations, then you are definitely want to tune into this session. Dustin, are you there?